Did you know the man who invented modern organized crime wasn't Italian? The architect of America's underworld, Meyer Lansky, a Jewish immigrant who created a criminal empire worth over $300 million, that's $3 billion in today's money, yet never spent a single day in prison. The Jewish Mafia operated with strategic brilliance, controlling politicians, judges, and even countries while remaining virtually untouchable. They masterminded the largest gambling operations in American history, including the transformation of Las Vegas from desert to destination. Their influence extended into Cuba and beyond, creating financial networks that puzzled federal investigators for decades. Today, I'm revealing how this shadow organization built power through intelligence rather than violence. While Al Capone's face splashed across front pages of newspapers nationwide, a different kind of criminal mastermind worked in the shadows. Meyer Lansky, a Polish immigrant with an unassuming appearance, possessed a mathematical genius that would revolutionize American crime. Standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, Lansky's physical stature betrayed nothing of his towering influence over the criminal underworld. Born in Poland in 1902, Lansky arrived at Ellis Island as a 10-year-old boy. On the Lower East Side of Manhattan, while other neighborhood kids fought with fists, he calculated odds and analyzed systems. One teacher reportedly found him correcting the school's accounting books at age 12. His exceptional mathematical abilities led him to become the financial architect of modern organized crime, transforming raw street numbers into empire-building capital. By the 1920s, while Prohibition fueled violent turf wars among Italian gangs, Lansky developed a radically different approach. Violence, he understood, attracted unwanted attention. Money flowed more freely when it moved quietly. "We're bigger than U.S. Steel," he once remarked privately to an associate, comparing his criminal empire to America's largest corporation. This wasn't hyperbole. Lansky's annual profits reportedly exceeded $300 million at their peak, rivaling major corporations of the era. Lansky's criminal innovation manifested in his approach to money. He created elaborate laundering systems where cash from bootlegging, gambling, and extortion flowed through legitimate businesses, emerging as clean, taxable income. He maintained double sets of books with such precision that investigators later marveled at his accounting methods. In one famous case, IRS agents spent 3 years auditing a single Lansky-controlled hotel without finding a discrepancy. His partnership with Benjamin Bugsy Siegel and Charles Lucky Luciano formed what criminologists now recognize as the first truly multi-ethnic crime syndicate. In an era of deep racial divisions, their organization transcended traditional boundaries with Italian, Jewish, and Irish criminals coordinating operations. The leadership structure Lansky established resembled a corporate board more than a gang. Regular meetings were held in hotel conference rooms. Territories were assigned based on potential profit margins rather than arbitrary boundaries. One FBI informant described watching Lansky divide profits using complex mathematical formulas that mystified even hardened criminals. While other gangsters limited operations to neighborhoods or cities, Lansky thought globally. By the 1940s, his gambling ventures spanned from Cuba to the Bahamas and Europe. His international money movement systems predated modern offshore banking by decades. Lansky thrived partly due to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover's refusal to acknowledge organized crime's existence. While Hoover directed resources toward fighting communism, Lansky's network operated with remarkable freedom. Unlike flamboyant gangsters, Lansky cultivated anonymity, living modestly in middle-class neighborhoods. His disciplined approach to violence made him nearly untouchable for prosecutors. Despite decades of investigation, he spent only a few months in prison throughout his entire criminal career, proving that in organized crime, the mathematicians often outlast the muscle. Lansky's arm's-length approach to violence represented just the tip of a criminal iceberg that would transform organized crime in America. Beneath the surface lay a revolutionary takeover strategy that prioritized infiltration over intimidation. This approach culminated on September 10, 1931, when the night of the Sicilian Vespers saw old guard mafia bosses systematically eliminated across America. While Italian triggermen executed the killings, Jewish gangsters like Lansky orchestrated the operation from a distance. a pattern defining their rise to power. Unlike their Italian counterparts who established dominance through visible displays of force, Jewish mobsters operated with surgical precision, playing chess while others played checkers. They recognized that true power came from controlling systems rather than neighborhoods. By 1932, Jewish gangster Longy Zwilman had established such complete control over Newark, New Jersey, that he earned the title Al Capone of New Jersey. Yet unlike Capone, Zwilman cultivated political relationships and maintained a public image as a businessman and philanthropist, keeping him largely beyond legal reach. Law enforcement found themselves woefully unprepared for this new breed of criminal. When Treasury agents successfully prosecuted Capone on tax evasion, they believed they'd created a blueprint for dismantling organized crime. They failed to realize that Lansky and his associates had anticipated this vulnerability, constructing elaborate corporate shields that resembled today's offshore financial networks. Their financial sophistication blindsided federal investigators, still using techniques designed for bootleggers and street thugs. Creating legitimate-appearing front companies became a cornerstone of Jewish Mafia operations. Mo Dalitz transformed illegal gambling operations into the Malaska Corporation, ostensibly a legitimate molasses distribution company. These criminal entrepreneurs hired accountants, lawyers, and business managers who created layers of protection between illegal activities and their beneficiaries. By the mid-1930s, they had established corporate structures so complex that proving criminal control required resources beyond most police departments' capabilities. Their political influence relied on strategic campaign contributions and genuine business relationships with politicians. In Detroit, the Purple Gang's connections permeated local governments so deeply that police investigations were routinely compromised before they began. When violence proved necessary, Jewish mob leaders deployed Murder Incorporated, the enforcement arm partially controlled by figures like Louis Lepke Buchalter. Operating from a Brooklyn candy store, this organization carried out hundreds of contract killings with remarkable operational security. Bodies vanished without witnesses, often dissolved in acid baths in a facility nicknamed the Murder Laboratory. Control of labor unions provided another powerful lever. By controlling unions, they gained influence over entire industries. Lepke Buchalter's grip on garment industry unions allowed him to extract payments from factory owners desperate to avoid work stoppages, generating millions annually. They transformed protection rackets into arrangements resembling legitimate business relationships by creating industry associations, providing actual services like dispute resolution. Many business owners didn't realize they were being extorted since the arrangements seemed mutually beneficial. Through these methods, Jewish gangsters established shadow control over critical sectors of the American economy, infiltrating the garment industry, trucking, hospitality, and entertainment, while transforming Prohibition-era liquor distribution networks into legitimate businesses that obscured their continued criminal activities. The financial shadow cast by Meyer Lansky stretched far beyond what authorities could track or contain. While law enforcement celebrated their occasional victories against visible criminal operations, a financial phantom was taking shape in America's economic shadows. How did Lansky and his associates manage to move millions of dollars across international borders, control major casinos, and infiltrate banking systems without leaving the paper trails that prosecutors desperately needed to build their cases? The answer lies in what one Treasury agent called criminal financial engineering. When federal prosecutors finally managed to get Lansky before a grand jury in 1947, his simple declaration, "I'm a gambler," was perhaps the most masterful understatement in criminal history. By then, Lansky had constructed an invisible financial empire, using techniques that wouldn't be properly understood for decades. At the heart of this system was the revolutionary concept of the skim. Casino operations provided the perfect cover. Before gambling proceeds were officially counted, trusted operatives would remove a percentage of cash directly from counting rooms. These funds vanished from accounting records before they officially existed. A 1956 IRS investigation estimated that 40% of casino revenue disappeared through this method. "You can't tax what you can't find," Lansky reportedly told an associate, "and you can't prosecute what you can't prove." This philosophy guided their sophisticated financial architecture. the Jewish Mafia pioneered what became known as the layering technique, a financial maze where illicit funds travel through at least 7 different transactions before reaching their destination. Like peeling an onion, each layer concealed another beneath it, obscuring the money's criminal origins. By the time we figured out the second layer, one former FBI agent later admitted, they had already added 3 more. Years before corporate shells became commonplace, Lansky established dozens of holding companies across multiple jurisdictions, creating labyrinths that investigators couldn't navigate. As one frustrated FBI agent noted in a 1962 memo, "Subject maintains no known bank accounts in his name, owns no property in his name, has no safe deposit boxes in his name, yet somehow controls millions." Unlike Italian mobsters who intimidated bankers, Jewish gangsters recruited them as partners. Several major institutions in Miami, New York, and Havana employed professionals who processed seemingly legitimate transactions while moving millions in criminal proceeds. The organization operated with almost religious devotion to avoiding written records. Major decisions involving millions were made verbally in casual settings. When documentation was unavoidable, they used code systems and cutouts, clean record individuals who served as nominal business owners without knowing the criminal enterprise they fronted. Between 1951 and 1965, the Justice Department built 7 major cases against Lansky, each collapsing due to missing documentation or witnesses with sudden memory problems. By the mid-1950s, Lansky had established banking relationships in Switzerland, Panama, and the Bahamas. What made this empire truly remarkable was its corporate structure. The Jewish Mafia operated with designated financial officers, investment specialists, and retirement plans for loyal members. This organizational sophistication created a criminal enterprise that functioned with the efficiency of a Fortune 500 company while maintaining the secrecy of a spy network. The genius of Meyer Lansky wasn't merely funneling dirty money. It was transforming criminal enterprise into something entirely legitimate through America's newest playground. When the Flamingo Hotel's neon lights first illuminated the Nevada desert in December 1946, few realized they were witnessing more than an ambitious casino opening. They were seeing the birth of a mathematical system designed to generate billions with full legal protection. Las Vegas in the 1940s was little more than a dusty railroad stop when Lansky recognized its unique potential. Nevada had legalized gambling in 1931, creating what Lansky described to associates as the only place in America where we can operate without looking over our shoulders. While other criminals continued risking prison with illegal operations, Lansky calculated that controlling legal gambling would yield greater profits with virtually no legal risk. The Flamingo's opening night transformed the desert landscape. Hollywood stars arrived in limousines, champagne flowed freely, and the casino floor buzzed with energy as dealers in crisp uniforms managed games at packed tables. The neon glow visible for miles symbolized Lansky's vision materializing in the desert darkness. Behind this glamorous facade, Lansky methodically designed gambling systems with the precision of a scientist conducting experiments. He calculated the exact mathematical advantage needed for each game, sufficient to guarantee casino profits while allowing enough player wins to keep gamblers returning. His formula for American roulette established a 5.26% house edge, creating what one casino manager called a perfect balance between player hope and mathematical certainty. Lansky pioneered what became standard industry practice, identifying high-value gamblers and cultivating their loyalty. The Flamingo introduced systematic comping, offering free accommodations and meals to big spenders while tracking their gambling patterns. This psychological approach transformed occasional players into repeat customers who lost far more than the value of complimentary services received. The operation expanded beyond Las Vegas. In Havana, Lansky applied identical systems at the Hotel Nacional, attracting wealthy Americans seeking entertainment beyond U.S. restrictions. When pressure mounted in one location, operations shifted seamlessly to new jurisdictions, from Nevada to Cuba to the Bahamas, maintaining continuous presence in legal gambling. The innovative 2-count system allowed casino employees to count receipts twice, officially and unofficially. The difference, known as the skim, generated millions in untaxed cash. A Nevada Gaming Control Board investigator later estimated that between 15% and 40% of casino revenue disappeared through this method before being recorded. This system enabled hidden ownership through frontmen, respectable businessmen and celebrities who provided legitimate facades for sophisticated criminal enterprises. Howard Hughes's later purchase of several properties allegedly allowed previous controlling interests to cash out while maintaining the casino's legitimate appearance. Lansky's most enduring achievement was creating a business template that persists today. Modern casinos operate on principles he established: calculated house advantages, player tracking systems, psychological incentives to continue gambling, and operational methodologies maximizing profit while maintaining entertainment value. What began on that glittering opening night in the desert fundamentally redesigned an entire industry, transforming gambling from backroom criminality into corporate entertainment. The government that spent years trying to imprison Meyer Lansky eventually recruited him as an intelligence asset. What could possibly make the Naval Intelligence Office turn to notorious gangsters for help during World War II? The answer lies in a classified program the government tried to keep secret for decades. In 1933, New York City's Madison Square Garden filled with thousands of American Nazi sympathizers for a German-American Bund rally. As speakers praised Hitler's policies, a group of Jewish mobsters led by Meyer Lansky surrounded the venue. Armed with baseball bats and brass knuckles, they stormed the rally, breaking up the gathering with calculated violence while police officers mysteriously failed to intervene. When questioned later about this vigilante action, Lansky reportedly said, "We didn't ask permission from anyone. We just did it." This violent confrontation marked the beginning of an unusual chapter in American history. As anti-Semitism rose across Europe and within the United States, Jewish gangsters positioned themselves as defenders against domestic fascism. Lansky's associates disrupted Nazi rallies in cities across America, beating Nazi sympathizers in street confrontations with the same organizational precision they applied to their criminal enterprises. The authorities' tacit tolerance of these anti-Nazi activities transformed into formal collaboration after Pearl Harbor. In February 1942, the luxury liner SS Normandy, being converted into a troop transport ship, mysteriously caught fire and capsized at a New York dock. Fearing German sabotage, naval intelligence made an unprecedented decision. Yesterday's outlaws would become today's guardians of national security. This partnership became Operation Underworld. Commander Charles Haffenden of Naval Intelligence met directly with Lansky at mobster Frank Costello's Manhattan apartment. Lansky explained that his organization controlled the docks through their influence over maritime unions, giving them intelligence access government agents couldn't achieve alone. Soon, Lansky's operatives were monitoring dock workers, tracking suspicious activities, and securing military shipments. Naval intelligence provided special identification cards to known gangsters, allowing them to move freely through restricted areas. Men who had built careers evading federal agents now worked alongside them, establishing intelligence networks throughout New York's ports. For Jewish gangsters, this collaboration represented both patriotic contribution and protection against prosecution. Naval intelligence intervened in several pending criminal cases against Lansky associates, citing national security concerns. Investigations stalled, evidence disappeared. The alliance proved effective. Suspected German agents were identified, thefts of military supplies plummeted, and no major acts of sabotage occurred at New York ports for the remainder of the war. Lansky's union connections ensured labor peace when it mattered most, preventing strikes that might have delayed critical shipments to Europe. These relationships continued after the war. When Castro seized power in Cuba in 1959, threatening Lansky's casino interests, former intelligence contacts reportedly approached him again. CIA operations against Castro's regime involved several figures connected to Lansky's organization, suggesting cooperation continued into the Cold War. The full extent of these arrangements remained classified for decades. During Senator Kefauver's televised hearings on organized crime in the early 1950s, questions about wartime cooperation were mysteriously abandoned. The government only officially acknowledged Operation Underworld in 1977. with full disclosure coming in the 1980s after Lansky's death, revealing how America's criminal underworld became its secret wartime shield. Lansky's death in 1983 triggered what investigators hoped would be the final revelation in a decades-long pursuit. Federal agents who had tracked his operations across continents expected to uncover vast hidden wealth. Instead, they found themselves staring at an almost empty ledger, his official estate valued at just $57,000. The man who once controlled a criminal empire worth billions had apparently died nearly penniless, creating organized crime's greatest unsolved financial puzzle. For federal investigators, this modest sum represented the culmination of decades of frustration. They had watched Lansky's operation generate astronomical profits from casinos spanning 3 countries. Tax authorities estimated his personal worth at hundreds of millions, billions in today's currency. Yet when they opened his books after his death, virtually nothing remained. "We've been looking for Meyer Lansky's money for 25 years, admitted one Treasury investigator in 1987, pounding his desk in visible frustration. "It's the holy grail of organized crime investigations. We've followed leads across 4 continents, always one step behind." In his final years, Lansky himself contributed to the mystery. When questioned about his fortune by a relative, he reportedly smiled and said, "If you're looking for it after I'm gone, you won't find it where you think." His occasional cryptic references to Swiss accounts and Israeli investments during recorded prison visits led investigators down countless dead ends. The Financial Disappearing Act began years before Lansky's death. As his health deteriorated in the 1970s, his financial footprint grew increasingly faint. Properties changed hands. Companies dissolved and reformed under different names. Bank accounts emptied systematically. Financial forensics experts later theorized that Lansky had implemented what one called a controlled demolition of his financial network. He transformed his money into forms that couldn't be tracked through conventional methods, explained former IRS investigator Harold Levinson. One theory involved portable wealth, diamonds and precious metals that could move without electronic traces. A former associate claimed in a 1991 interview that Lansky had systematically converted cash into diamonds throughout the 1970s using contacts in Antwerp's diamond district. Other experts believe Lansky pioneered what we now call nested trusts, similar to today's complex corporate structures used by multinational tech companies to minimize tax liability. These create layers of ownership so complex that determining who controls the assets becomes nearly impossible. The Israel connection remains particularly intriguing. During Lansky's 9-month stay in 1970 while applying for citizenship, rumors circulated that he had transferred millions to Israeli banks. Subsequent investigations found only minor accounts. Either the money was never there, or it was hidden with sophistication beyond what conventional banking investigations could uncover, noted former Mossad officer David Kimche. Perhaps most compelling is the theory that Lansky distributed his wealth years before death through legitimately structured transactions with extended family members. After decades, these funds became indistinguishable from legal money. He understood something fundamental that most criminals never grasp, explained former prosecutor James Nolan. After enough legitimate transactions over enough time, dirty money becomes indistinguishable from clean money. He wasn't hiding his wealth. He was laundering it so thoroughly that it disappeared into the legitimate economy. The legacy of the Jewish Mafia isn't carved into tombstones or prison records. It's hidden in plain sight, in the architecture of modern financial systems, the structure of corporate crime, and the invisible pathways money travels across borders. These shadow architects preferred anonymity over fame, unlike their Italian counterparts who became Hollywood legends. Their legacy lives in sophisticated systems that function decades after their creators vanished. Intrigued by these forgotten crime architects? They didn't just run rackets, they rewrote rule books. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to Crime Republic for our upcoming video on how organized crime secretly shaped Hollywood.